Look at the device you are using right now. Whether it is a $1,000 smartphone, a high-end tablet, or the battery powering an electric vehicle that promises to save the planet. It is sleek, it is modern, and it represents the pinnacle of human engineering. But there is a dark, terrifying secret hidden inside the circuitry of your device. A secret that tech giants in Silicon Valley and automakers in Europe do not want you to think about. To build the clean wireless future of tomorrow, we are relying on a brutal, blood-soaked war raging in the darkest corners of today. Welcome to Anime Atlas Tour. Recently, a highly classified risk assessment map was brought to light, detailing the most volatile conflict zones on the African continent in 2026. Today we are opening the dossier on the first and most critical red zone on this map. We are traveling to the Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo. This is not a war over religion or borders. This is a trillion-dollar resource war for the two elements that keep the modern world awake: cobalt and coltan. Before we dive into the dirt and expose the true cost of your smartphone, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on the bell. We are exposing the world's most guarded geopolitical secrets, and you cannot afford to miss what we have uncovered. To understand why the Democratic Republic of the Congo is bleeding, you have to understand the sheer geological miracle beneath its soil. The DRC is arguably the richest country on the planet in terms of untapped natural resources, holding an estimated $24 trillion in raw minerals. But two specific minerals are currently driving a global frenzy. The first is cobalt. Cobalt is the magical ingredient that prevents lithium-ion batteries from catching fire and overheating. Without cobalt, your smartphone would explode in your pocket, and the global electric vehicle revolution would grind to a complete halt. Over 70% of the entire world's cobalt supply comes from this single country. The second is coltan. When refined, coltan becomes tantalum, a highly heat-resistant metal used to make microscopic capacitors. These capacitors store electricity and are the reason your phone can be so incredibly thin while holding a massive charge. The Eastern DRC is sitting on a near monopoly of the elements required for the 21st century to function, but this geological blessing is a geopolitical curse. The global demand for electric vehicles and smart devices has skyrocketed the price of these minerals, creating a modern-day gold rush. And where there is a gold rush, there is extreme violence. If you look at the corporate sustainability reports of major tech companies, they will tell you their minerals are ethically sourced from mechanized, regulated mines. The reality on the ground in the Eastern DRC is a completely different, terrifying universe. Up to 30% of the cobalt exported from the Congo comes from what are called artisanal miners, locally known as cruisers. Do not let the word artisanal fool you. There is nothing charming about it. This means millions of men, women, and tragically children digging into toxic radioactive earth using hand tools, rebar, and sometimes their bare hands. Entire landscapes look like post-apocalyptic lunar craters. Tunnels are dug hundreds of feet deep, without any structural support, ventilation, or safety equipment. Tunnel collapses are a weekly occurrence, burying workers alive in the dark. The toxicity of the minerals seeps into the groundwater. Birth defects, severe respiratory diseases, and heavy metal poisoning are tearing through the mining communities. These workers pull the most valuable dirt on Earth out of the ground, earning barely $1 or $2 a day. They are the invisible ghosts powering the multi-trillion-dollar tech industry. But how does blood-stained dirt from a rebel-controlled territory end up in a pristine white box in an Apple or Samsung store? The answer lies in the map's red zones. The Eastern DRC is a fractured landscape controlled by over 100 different armed rebel groups, including the notorious M23 militia. These groups fight relentlessly for control over the mines. They extort the miners, demand illegal taxes, and use extreme violence to maintain their territory. The minerals are the currency that buys their weapons. Once the coltan and cobalt are extracted, the laundering process begins. The minerals are smuggled across the porous borders into neighboring countries like Rwanda and Uganda. There the paperwork is forged. Suddenly, the conflict minerals are magically tagged as clean and ethically sourced. From there, they are loaded onto massive cargo ships bound for Asia. Which brings us to the biggest geopolitical player in this shadow war, China. Over the last 2 decades, Chinese state-backed corporations have quietly purchased or financed nearly 80% of the major cobalt processing facilities in the Congo. While the West was looking the other way, Beijing secured a total chokehold on the global battery supply chain. The raw material is shipped to Chinese megafactories, refined, and placed into batteries that are then sold to American and European tech giants. By the time the battery reaches your phone, its bloody origins have been completely erased by layers of international corporate bureaucracy. But how does blood-stained dirt from a rebel-controlled territory end up in a pristine white box in an Apple or Samsung store? The answer lies in the map's red zones. The Eastern DRC is a fractured landscape controlled by over 100 different armed rebel groups, including the notorious M23 militia. These groups fight relentlessly for control over the mines. They extort the miners, demand illegal taxes, and use extreme violence to maintain their territory. The minerals are the currency that buys their weapons. Once the coltan and cobalt are extracted, the laundering process begins. The minerals are smuggled across the porous borders into neighboring countries like Rwanda and Uganda. There, the paperwork is forged. Suddenly, the conflict minerals are magically tagged as clean and ethically sourced. From there, they are loaded onto massive cargo ships bound for Asia. Which brings us to the biggest geopolitical player in this shadow war, China. Over the last 2 decades, Chinese state-backed corporations have quietly purchased or financed nearly 80% of the major cobalt processing facilities in the Congo. While the West was looking the other way, Beijing secured a total chokehold on the global battery supply chain. The raw material is shipped to Chinese megafactories, refined, and placed into batteries that are then sold to American and European tech giants. By the time the battery reaches your phone, its bloody origins have been completely erased by layers of international corporate bureaucracy. We are standing at the edge of a massive paradox. Western governments are mandating the phase-out of gasoline cars by 2035. The demand for cobalt and coltan is expected to increase by over 500% in the next decade. We are attempting to save the global climate by relying on a supply chain that completely destroys the environment and the human rights of an entire African nation. We are trading carbon emissions for conflict minerals. The intelligence map shows us a grim future. As resources become more scarce, the proxy wars in the Eastern DRC will only intensify. It is a modern form of technological colonialism. The next time your battery drops to 1%, remember the absolute hell on earth someone endured to give you that charge. The blood battery war is only the first piece of the puzzle. This map holds secrets that threaten the stability of the entire globe, and we are just getting started. Before we reveal what is coming next, if you want to understand how the world really works behind the headlines, you need to subscribe to Anime Atlas Tour right now. Join the community, hit the like button, and help us expose the truth. Next time, in episode 2, we move north to the Sahel. We will uncover the terrifying terror gold trade, where jihadist organizations are mining thousands of tons of illegal gold in Burkina Faso and Mali to fund a massive shadow war across the desert. In episode 3, we will expose the Red Shadow, how Russia's notorious Wagner Group, now the Africa Corps, is quietly taking over absolute control of the continent's most valuable assets. And in the finale, episode 4, we will trace the illicit migrant crossroads, the smuggling empires that control human lives, and the dark money flowing through the Sahara. The intelligence dossier is open. Now I want to hear from you down in the comments. Knowing the human cost of cobalt and coltan, does it change the way you look at the push for mandatory electric vehicles? Let me know your thoughts, and I will see you in episode 2. Gold. For thousands of years, it has been the ultimate symbol of wealth, stability, and power. Today you see it in the windows of luxury jewelry stores in London, New York, and Paris. You see it stacked in massive sterile vaults inside central banks. It represents the foundation of the global economy. But what if I told you that the gold ring on your finger, or the gold components inside your computer, might have directly funded a terror attack, purchased a missile, or fueled a violent insurgency? Welcome back to Anime Atlas Tour and episode 2 of our classified Africa Risk Assessment series. In our last episode, we exposed the blood batteries of the Congo. Today we are opening the second dossier on our intelligence map. We are shifting our focus to a massive arid strip of land crossing Africa, the Sahel. This is the story of the terror gold trade, a multi-billion-dollar shadow economy, where extreme jihadist groups have become massive mining cartels, laundering thousands of tons of illegal gold to buy weapons, effectively fighting a proxy war that stretches all the way to the coast of Yemen. Before we expose the darkest financial pipeline on the planet, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications. This is a 4-part series exposing the geopolitical secrets that shape our world, and you need to be here for every single episode. Let us look closely at our intelligence map. Highlighted here are Mali, Niger, and the #1 target country on the continent, Burkina Faso. This region is known as the Sahel, a harsh, unforgiving semi-arid region that separates the Sahara Desert to the north from the tropical savannas to the south. For decades, these countries were considered desperately poor, but in the early 2000s, a massive discovery was made. The sand and rocks of the Sahel were practically glowing with gold. A modern-day gold rush exploded. Millions of impoverished locals abandoned agriculture and flocked to the desert to dig. These are known as artisanal and small-scale gold mines, or ASGM. There are no heavy machines here, just men and women using pickaxes, dynamite, and highly toxic mercury to extract tiny flakes of gold from the dust. By 2020, these informal, unregulated desert mines were producing hundreds of tons of gold every single year. It became a billion-dollar grassroots industry. But wherever there is $1 billion sitting completely unprotected in the desert, predators are guaranteed to follow. The Sahel is a region plagued by political instability, weak governments, and highly porous borders. It is the perfect breeding ground for insurgencies. Over the last decade, affiliates of Al-Qaeda like JNIM and offshoots of the Islamic State realized they were fighting a war while standing on a literal gold mine. According to the map's data, the Sahel has become a jihadist, gold-rich safe haven. The strategy was simple and brutal. Heavily armed militant groups swept through the desert on motorbikes and pickup trucks, launching violent attacks on these artisanal mining camps. They did not shut the mines down, they took them over. The militants became the new management. They force the local miners to dig. They tax every single gram of gold that comes out of the ground, and they provide security for a heavy fee. For these terror groups, gold is the perfect currency. Unlike bank transfers or cryptocurrency, gold is completely untraceable. It cannot be frozen by the US Treasury. It does not require an internet connection, and it is universally accepted. The militants are literally pulling their funding directly out of the sand. But an armed militant leader cannot simply walk into a major European financial institution with a bag full of unregulated desert gold and exchange it for cash. The origin of these resources must be obscured. They need to be integrated into the legitimate global supply chain. How is this achieved? This unofficial gold is transported out of the Sahel region through a massive shadow network of couriers. Using informal transit routes and avoiding official checkpoints, the resources are moved across borders, completely bypassing standard customs protocols and entering regions with lighter economic oversight. From there, a significant portion of this undocumented African gold makes its way to major international trading hubs, particularly in the Middle East. These global financial centers serve as the primary crossroads for the world's precious metals. Once this conflict-sourced gold lands in massive commercial refineries, it is melted down. It is physically mixed with legally mined gold, completely erasing its original geological and geographical signature. It receives new documentation, a shiny new stamp of approval, and just like that, gold from conflict zones enters the legal market. It is then exported globally, eventually making its way into Western markets, international financial institutions, and luxury jewelry stores. So what do these armed factions acquire with the massive capital generated from this washed gold? Look back at the map. Follow the red line stretching from the Sahel all the way across the Red Sea to the Arabian Peninsula. This region has been destabilized by prolonged conflict, with various non-state actors controlling massive stockpiles of military-grade hardware. The intelligence dossier reveals a chilling connection: the resource for hardware pipeline. The capital generated in international markets is used to procure advanced tactical equipment and drone technology from grey market logistics networks operating off the coastal waters. This equipment is then shipped back across the transit routes into Africa, supplying insurgent networks and creating a terrifying endless loop of instability. Resources go out, military hardware comes in. This shadow economy proves that the conflicts on the continent are not isolated local disputes. They are multi-billion-dollar global enterprises, intricately connected to the global financial system. and the luxury items we consume. This is just the second piece of the puzzle. The Africa risk assessment map gets much darker. If you appreciate this level of deep geopolitical analysis, you must subscribe to Anime Atlas Tour right now. Hit that subscribe button and join the most informed community on YouTube. Next time in Episode 3, we will shift our focus to the Red Shadow. We will expose how massive private military contractors and state-backed security forces are exploiting these exact same regional disputes to secure massive resource contracts and challenge Western dominance on the continent. And in our epic finale, Episode 4, we will map the unapproved transit corridors crossing the Sahara, where human tracking and dark money intersect. The dossier remains open. Now I want to hear from you in the comments below. Knowing how easily conflict resources enter the legal market, do you think there is any real way to regulate these global hubs? Let me know your thoughts, and I will see you in Episode 3. When we think of global warfare, we imagine sovereign nations. We picture official flags on uniforms, international treaties, and state-funded militaries operating under strict rules of engagement. But the rules of the game have fundamentally changed. In the 21st century, geopolitical dominance is no longer achieved solely by deploying national armies. It is achieved through outsourcing. It is achieved through massive, unaccountable shadow organizations operating entirely off the books. Welcome back to Anime Atlas Tour in Episode 3 of our classified Africa Risk Assessment series. In our previous episodes, we exposed the resource wars of the Congo and the informal gold pipelines of the Sahel. Today we are answering the ultimate question: who is stepping into the chaos to secure these multi-billion-dollar assets? The answer lies in the lower left corner of our intelligence map. We are exposing the rise of the Africa Corps, the rebranding of the most notorious private military contractor network on the planet. This is the story of how an unregulated shadow force is methodically taking over the African continent, country by country. Before we decode this massive shift in global power, hit that subscribe button right now. We are releasing deep geopolitical intelligence that mainstream networks gloss over, and you need to be subscribed to catch every piece of the puzzle. To understand the rise of these private security conglomerates, you have to understand the massive geopolitical vacuum that was created over the last 5 years. For decades, Western powers, primarily France and the United States, maintained a significant military presence across the Sahel and Central Africa to stabilize governments and secure strategic interests. But widespread political unrest, shifting alliances, and a series of military transitions in countries like Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger completely altered the landscape. The traditional Western security umbrellas were rapidly pushed out or forced to withdraw. This created a terrifying scenario for local governments. They were suddenly left completely exposed, facing highly organized, well-funded insurgent networks, the exact networks we mapped in Episode 2. These fragile governments needed a solution, and they needed it immediately. They didn't want international lectures on policy, they wanted sheer tactical enforcement, and a shadow force was waiting in the wings to provide exactly that. Enter the private military contractors. Initially operating under independent corporate banners, these entities offer what is known in intelligence circles as a regime survival package. They provide elite tactical training, heavy equipment, and direct combat support to local governments. But these shadow armies do not operate for free, and fragile states often do not have the hard currency to pay them billions of dollars. So a new highly lucrative business model was created, the resource concession. Instead of cash, the host countries pay these private contractors with direct access to their most valuable national assets. The contractors are granted exclusive mining rights to undocumented gold reserves, diamond mines, and critical mineral deposits. It is a brilliant, entirely self-sustaining loop. The contractors provide security, which allows them to secure the mines. They extract the wealth, export it through informal global networks, and use the massive profits to fund their own ongoing operations. They are not just an army for hire. They are a heavily armed multinational mining corporation operating above the law. For years, this network operated with a degree of plausible deniability, completely separate from formal state apparatuses. However, following internal structural changes and high-profile leadership shifts within the Eastern European sphere, the model evolved. The intelligence dossier indicates a massive consolidation. The fragmented mercenary groups have been brought under a more unified state-backed umbrella, currently operating under the banner of the Africa Corps. This is no longer just a group of independent contractors chasing gold. It is a highly coordinated geopolitical strategy. By embedding themselves into the security apparatus of multiple African nations, this state-backed umbrella effectively controls the flow of resources and wields massive political influence without ever officially declaring war or deploying a formal national military. Why does this matter to the rest of the world? Look at the map as a whole. This shadow network is not just picking random countries. They are strategically positioning themselves across a continuous belt of land from the Red Sea to the Atlantic Ocean. By dominating this specific geography, they achieve two massive strategic goals. First, they secure a chokehold on the critical minerals required for global technology, directly challenging Western supply chains. Second, and perhaps more importantly, they are positioning themselves directly across the major transit corridors that lead to the Mediterranean. They are securing leverage over the most volatile geopolitical pressure point of the 21st century. The expansion of these private military conglomerates proves that the future of global conflict is corporate, unregulated, and fought entirely in the shadows over raw materials. This intelligence assessment is nearly complete, but the most critical piece of the map remains. If you want to understand the hidden forces shaping the globe, you must subscribe to Anime Atlas Tour right now. Hit the bell notification and join the community. Next time in our epic finale, Episode 4, we will decode the final layer of the map. We will trace the migrant routes and smuggling crossroads, the unapproved logistical networks that move illicit goods, undocumented wealth, and human lives across the Sahara Desert. The dossier is almost fully open. I want to hear your perspective in the comments. Do you believe the era of traditional national armies is over, replaced by these corporate military contractors? Let me know your thoughts down below, and I will see you in Episode 4. When we look at a map of the Sahara Desert, we see millions of square miles of empty, uninhabitable sand. We assume it is a dead zone, a natural barrier completely isolated from the global economy. But the intelligence map tells a completely different story. Hidden beneath the vast emptiness of the Sahara is the most lucrative unapproved logistics network on the planet. It is an invisible highway where billions of dollars, illicit resources, and human lives are moved every single day. Welcome to the final episode of our Classified Africa Risk Assessment series on Anime Atlas Tour. We have exposed the tech mines of the Congo, the conflict gold of the Sahel, and the private mercenary empires. Today we decode the final layer, the smuggling crossroads. We are looking directly at Libya and the transit routes moving north toward the Mediterranean. This is where all the chaos converges. Before we open this final dossier, hit that subscribe button. You are about to see the reality of global transit, that international borders completely fail to stop. Look at the northern section of our map. The focal point of these dark logistics is Libya. Following the collapse of its government over a decade ago, Libya fractured. It ceased to be a traditional functioning state and transformed into a massive, unregulated transit hub. Because of its massive coastline along the Mediterranean Sea, it is the ultimate gateway to Europe. But to reach that coast, you have to cross the desert. And the desert is not controlled by police or border patrols. It is controlled by complex networks of smugglers, armed factions, and militant organizations. These networks operate massive fleets of off-road trucks, moving entirely off the grid. They navigate the dunes using GPS and satellite phones, completely invisible to international regulators. The most heartbreaking and profitable cargo moving along these invisible highways is human capital. Billions of desperate people, fleeing the exact resource conflicts we covered in the previous episodes, are pushed northward. The intelligence map explicitly labels these as migrant routes, but notes that they are controlled by extreme militant organizations. This is not charity. It is a highly organized multi-billion-dollar enterprise. People are forced to pay exorbitant fees to these transit cartels. Once they enter the shadow corridors, they are completely at the mercy of the smugglers. The desert becomes a trap. The same routes used to smuggle conflict gold out of the Sahel are used to move these undocumented populations toward the coast. The terrifying reality of this network is what intelligence agencies call convergence. The trucks heading north are packed with undocumented migrants and unrefined resources. But what happens when those trucks turn around and head back south? They do not travel empty. The capital generated at the coastal smuggling hubs is used to purchase military-grade hardware, unapproved technology, and tactical supplies. The trucks drive back down into the Sahel, feeding the exact armed groups that are destabilizing the region. It is a perfectly engineered, self-sustaining loop of instability. The transit corridors fund the militants secure the mines generate the capital, and the capital buys the hardware. What this entire map reveals is that modern borders are largely an illusion. The international community attempts to regulate airports, shipping ports, and formal banking systems. But underneath it all, an entirely separate global economy is operating in the shadows. The Africa Risk Assessment Map is not just a warning about one continent. It is a blueprint of how unregulated logistics, resource demand, and shadow armies are quietly running the world beneath our feet. This concludes our 4-part intelligence dossier. We have connected the smartphone in your pocket to the Congo, the gold in global vaults to the Sahel, and the collapse of borders to shadow logistics. If you have been with us since episode 1, you now understand the geopolitical landscape better than 99% of the world. Make sure you are subscribed to Anime Atlas Tour and have the bell icon checked. We have many more classified maps and global mysteries to uncover. Let me know in the comments, after seeing the entire map, which sector do you think poses the biggest risk to global stability? Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next investigation.